about some of the changes to the 1996 draft that was presented to the junta. It really would not matter much at the end of the day whether the revised draft was also presented to the people in a way that the people would understand the extent of the changes and what these changes meant. Because at the end of the day, the people voted. And the vote of the people gave it that stamp of legality that was necessary for the Constitution to become the Constitution. But what is important, in my view, is the fact that we are able to show that changes that would have strengthened our governance structure were deliberately removed from the Constitution in order to build the true Frankenstein monster, which we eventually had. And that is the important take from this. Because these are also lessons learned for the future. Do we allow a constitution that is so weak that, we can have somebody as president who could claim that he should be crowned king, like we have heard in 2013 onwards. So let's continue with some of these points that you have raised in your submission. We've dealt with the appointments to various institutions.
That's right.
And you said the vetting provisions for appointments to those provisions were removed by Jammeh.
Most of them.
Yes. And the effect of that was to remove the power of Parliament to really decide that, okay, we would accept this person, we would reject that person, has been taken out.
Sorry. Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Yes, and
léegi dafa mel ni ñu eggal rek fañ emoon ci mbiri doole bi nga xam ne mënoon nañ koo jox waa néegi député yi pour bépp borom ndomba tànk boo xam ne jël nañ la liggéey ñu war a segga say mbir ba xam ne yelloo nga place bi ñu door la koo jox waaye nag luwaa boobu moom Jammeh daf ko teggi woon loolu yëpp jubluwaay bi rek mooy pour bañ a dooleel ñi nga xam ne ñoo nekk ci dégg député yi pour moom li nga xam ne moom la bëgg a mu dox rek mu mun faa dox.
According to your write-up, there was also a provision on challenge to election of president.
li nga xam ne moom nga binday tamit wane na ci am na bunta boo xam ne taxawaloon nañ ko pour nag ñu mun a ŋàññal li nga xam ne moo di anam yi ñoo tànnee njiitu réew.
That's right, Council.
Council.
Please tell us about this particular issue.
waaw léegi wax ñu nag mbir moomu naka la tëree.
Yes. The 96 draft provided any registered voter could mount a challenge before our courts, challenge whether somebody was validly elected as president or not. Any registered voter could do that.
képp koo xam ne nii nag watekat nga rek mënoon nga am yelleef pour dingat li nga xam ne ni mu ngi jëm ci wàlli place yooyu.
I don't have to explain how important that is, as in irrespective of where you're located. For as long as you're dissatisfied with the election, you could mount a challenge before our courts.
bu ko defee rek du haajo sax pour ma biral nag li nga xam ne ni mooy njëriñ li ci lalu rek ak fi nga mënte nekk rek ndegem daal kuy wate nga rek boo fekkee ne am nga ñaari xel ci li nga xam ne moo faxee ko ci wate boobu mën nga koo dingat.
That too got changed.
boobu tamit wecci woon nañ ko.
Registered voter was changed to a registered political party or independent candidate that took part in the elections.
bu ko defee nag registered voter di li nga xam ne mu ngi aju ci wàlli watekat bi boobu wecci woon nañ ko def ko tamit registered political party di parti boo xam ne dafay taxaw ci wàlli politique ak tamit which one again.
And the net effect of that would be to reduce the number of persons, entities, or bodies who would have legal standing to challenge the elections.
te loolu tamit dafa wàññi doole képp koo xam ne war naa am taxawaay pour mun a ŋàñña lu aju ci ni nga xam ne noonu la oote bi doxee.
That's very correct, Council. Lawyers call it standing or local standard.
loolu dëgg la Council.
And even if, say, a group of lawyers were to say, we are going to challenge this election, like the Bar Association, for instance, they cannot do it because they are not a registered political party or they would not have been an independent candidate in the relevant election.
mu ngi mel ni sax su fekkoon ne mbootaay looy taxawoon nañ pour wone seen ñaxtu lu aju ci ni nga xam ne noonu la élection bi doxee duñ ko doon mun a am ndaxte ñoom doonuñ mbootoom parti boo xam ne dañ taxaw pour ñu ooteel leen.
That's 100% correct.
waaw loolu moom am na.
And just imagine if an election were to happen and an independent candidate intends to challenge the outcome. Once that person is kidnapped and kept away, the challenge cannot happen.
bu fekkoon ne sax am na koo xam ne taxawal na boppam ne moom mu ngi war a wone mbañam ci lu aju ci ne élection yi doxee ñu dal di kof borom bon dafa mel ni kooku moom ñaxtoom du ko mun a wone.
That also is very correct, unless of course there is a political party ready to mount the challenge.
waaw loolu dëgg la.
Yeah, that's very correct.
dara rek mu am benn political party boo xam ne nii fas yéene naa dingat mbir moom.
Would you say that this change that was effected by Jammeh, was it for the better or was it to just further solidify his position?
loolu nga xam ne mooy soppali nga xam ne moom lañ def ndax loolu daf doon wala dooleel Jammeh wala pour taxawal saxal maxaamaam bi mu nekkee la woon.
I wouldn't say it was for the better, because if we say democracy is for the people, I mean, people should have a right to go to court if they are not sure somebody was elected validly into office as president. That should be a right available to everybody.
dama doon wax ne tamit ne ci jëmuwaay yi lu yëwén la de ndax bu fekkee ne ci démocratie la nekk nit war naa am sañ-sañ li nga xam ne nii mooy kiñ tànn bu fekkee ne doyut ko ne niñ ko tànnee jaar na yoon.
But there are even more profound and more impactful changes to the Constitution. Tell us about the appointment and removal of judges.
am na yeneen soppali yoo xam ne sax yooyu tam yu am doole la yuñ def ci wàllu luwaa yooyu wax ñu lu aju ci ni nga xam ne noonu la ñoo tànnee attekat yu mag yi.
Yes, for the judiciary, there are two aspects to the changes made to the draft. The draft in Section 145 provided that the Judicial Service Commission was meant to be independent. It wasn't supposed to be subject to the direction control of anyone. The Judicial Service Commission.
The Judicial Service Commission bi nag dañu waxoon ne dafa taxaw di dox ci sagoom ci kaw anam goo xam ne daal du ndigal wala du toppee ndigal ci kenn.
That also was removed.
boobu tamit dañ ko génne woon.
The draft also tried providing for security of tenure of judges.
To continue.
And it provided for a very, very elaborate process when it comes to removing judges. The process was really elaborate, and that's what you have in almost all democracies around the world.
Tey tamit nag loolu moo dëppoo li nga xam ne nii moo am ci démocratie yi dox lépp ci àdduna bi.
So what happened, that is what happened to Section 141, 2, subsection 2 of the draft. They added a new paragraph. In other words, after laying out that elaborate process saying, you know, you can only remove a judge when the judge reaches a retirement age, or when the judge decides on his own, on her own, to retire, or maybe based on infirmity of the body, mind, based on misbehavior. All that very elaborately spelled out. But what they did, when the soup came out of the kitchen, they added a new paragraph, paragraph C, and the new paragraph they added provided that the president may terminate the services of a judge. So that some of us found very confusing, and I'm not sure you find that in the constitution of any democracy around the world.
ca la ñuy dàkk nag ca bu njëkk ba moo wane attekat yu mag yi moom mën naa jeexal liggéeyam gannaaw boo xamee at yam waroon na defar service am jot na wala mu am ab gàllankoor wala leneen yooyu dañ ko teg yoon waaye nag ñoom ba ñuy génnee nag dañ ci yokkaat leneen ne président bi sax day war naa am doole pour dàq nag attekat yu mag yooyu.
What I'm saying in a sense, that new paragraph had no business being in the constitution. We wanted to ensure the independence of the judiciary.
Lim fi bëgg a wax nag mooy yokku boobu noonu ci paragraphe boobu de amul dara loo xam ne war na koo def ak constitution bu fekkee ne yaa ngi doxal nag yoon nguur goo xam ne nii buntu bi saytuwaale atte bi dañuy dox ak seen sago.
Is it still there as I speak to you?
lii nag mu ngi fa rek bét jamono ji may wax.
Mr. Sow, you are a student of comparative constitutional law. Do you know this provision to exist in any other democratic country in the world? That gives the president the power to remove a judge?
ci ñi nga xam ne ñoo di méngale luwaay yi ñoo dox ndax yow ci sa wàlli xam-xam gis nga ne loolu am na ci yeneen fànn yi ci àddina si pour président bi am doole pour génne àttekat yu mag yooyu.
I wouldn't say that. When we were drafting the last draft, we had access to all constitutions of the world, very searchable, very easy to use. And I can't remember finding that in the constitution of any country that calls itself a democracy, particularly in the Commonwealth.
Duma muna nangu ndax jamono bi nga xamé ñu doon bind dal dinañu diisoo ak yenn luwaay buntu luwaay réew yu bari ci àdduna bi te amul fa benn boo xam ne nii gis nañ fa lu mel noonu bu fekkee ne yaa ngi bëgg a doxal nag lu aju ci wàllu démocratie.
Donc this would be one draconian power that is inserted in the constitution, would you say?
kon li beneen songi doole la boo xam ne dañ ko jël rek dugal ko ci biir constitution bi loolu nga bëgg a wax.
I would agree to that, and not only was it inserted, it was used repeatedly, as you heard from the other witnesses who appeared before me.
danaa nangu ci loolu nekkul ne sax dañ ko ci defal de waaye dañ ko jëfoo te comme ni nga xam ne nettali na ko fi nag di yeneen i seede yi nga xam ne nii njëkkoon nañ fee teew.
Would you agree that it upended the balance that was created, or the separation of powers that was created in the draft constitution?
li nga nangu ne jeexal na nag li nga xam ne moo di xaajale biñ def ci wàlli doole giñ jël dugal ko ci yenn fànn yi ci constitution bi.
Very much so, because provided for in our most important document, and of course it was also used in practice, so law and practice. So
bu baax ci ñi nga xam ne mooy suñu yenn yi nga xam ne ni moom lañ ràññee te itamit ñu doon ko jëfoo di ko yaxantoo rek ci mu nekk loi.
And we've had examples of that, examples of its use. But what is the effect? Would you say that it significantly weakened the independence of the judiciary and in fact created very executive compliant judges in our judiciary?
léegi nañ fi ay misaal yu mel noonu loo mun a wax nag ne ndax dafa nasaxal li nga xam ne moo di doole attekat yi pour ñu doxal seen liggéey ci anam yoo xam ne ci seen coobare bopp laa doon.
Very much so, because when you talk about independence of the judiciary, the first or one of the first pillars that would come to mind is security of tenure.
waaw bu baax sax ndax bu fekkee ne yaa ngi wax lu aju ci wàlli doxalini buntu atteekaay bi ci mbiri sagote li ci njëkk nag ci ponk yi nga xam ne moom lañ war a feeñal mooy diir bi nga xam ne nii boromam mën na koo liggéey.
And that provision took that away.
te boobu tamit dañ ko génne.
And that is perhaps the reason why we have seen people like Justice Chauhan removed, Justice Izewaku removed, Justice Brobry removed, Justice Hassan Jallo removed, and a long list of judges removed because Jammeh was given the power to do so, which power you would not normally find in democratic societies.
Bon hejna sax bon lolu mo jox doole bi jamme nga xamne ñim lim ni ñepp génné nañ leen ci seen wàlli liggéey muy doole boo xam ne sax doo ko gis fenn ci benn réew boo xam ne mu ngeen dox ci anami doxini démocratie.
Very much so, because I was with the judiciary for almost 8 years, and for one of the judges you mentioned, Justice Brody, we still maintain a very good relationship. I worked briefly as acting judicial secretary while he was Chief Justice. So I was very much around when so many of them were removed.
Waaw nekk naa ci bunta boobu lu dem ci juróom-ñetti at am na sax ci kenn ki nga tudd joj boobu nga xam ne nii amoon naa moom jokkoo bu rafet ci jamono boobu.
It is often said that the judiciary is the last hope of the people for protection from a bad government.
Dina ñuy faral nag di wax ne ñi nga xam ne ñoo nekk ci bunti atte bi ñoom ñooy béréb bi nga xam ne moo war a nekk yaakaar bu mujj ci nit ñi ngir ñu mun leen a aar ci doxalini nguur goo xam ne doxut ci yoon.
If the president is given the power to remove those judges on whom the people rely for security, what is its net impact in a democratic society?
Su fekkee ne président bi jox nañ ko doole boo xam ne mun naa génne ñi nga xam ne ñoom la nit ñi yaakaar pour ñu aar leen bon loolu ban façon ngi doxee démocratie la.
Justice is key, as in very important for all and every society. You can't talk about there being justice anywhere if at the end of the day people have disputes or there is a conflict between people and they are sure they really wouldn't be able to have those disputes submitted before independent courts. Of course, that leads to chaos.
Dana mujjee ci loo xam ne nii mooy jaxasoo bu métti ci gan anam mooy bu fekkee ne am na nit ñoo xam ne nii féewaloo nañ duñ mun a am fu ñu naay fu ñu àggalee seen féewaloo boobu nuñ koy saafara ci buntu boo xam ne nii ñu ngi dox ci seen sabab.
And it's not just about the effect it would have on ordinary people, even investors. Some of the first questions they always would ask is how independent your judiciary is.
Amul rek ci ñi nga xam ne ñooy nit ñi dëkkee ci réew mi de waaye ñi nga xam ne nii ñooy génne seen koppar nar ko dépasse ci buntu marchandise ak yeneen ñoom sax li ñuy njëkk a laajte mooy seen judiciaire seen buntu àtte bi ñoom seen naka la seen sago tëddee.
But Jammeh did not stop at having a power to remove the judiciary.
Well,
the authority that would even ensure that the Judicial Service Commission, which looks after the contracts and welfare of judges, that too is removed.
Jammeh rek amul ci dooleel goo xam ne dafa génne ñi nga xam ne ñoo nekk ci wàlli atte bi waaye bunta bi nga xam ne moo war a sàmm pour aar ñi nga xam ne ñoom la ñoo jël ci wàlli atte boobu tamit dañ ko génne.
That's very correct, because like I said, the draft had a section, a subsection, which specifically provided that the Judicial Service Commission wasn't supposed to be subject to anybody's control or direction, but that didn't find its way into the 97 Constitution, so that was removed.
Wow, ci draft bi li nga xam ne lañ bind am na fa xat moo xam ne nii wane na woon na ne daal yëpp mu ngi aju rek ci sagute goo xam ne nii buntu attekaay bi dana ko doxe waaye nag ci biñ koy indi nag mu nekk loi ci atum 1997 nekkutoon fa dañ ko génnee.
It's like most of the important provisions that could limit Jammeh's power, that could tame executive excesses, were removed.
dafa mel ni lépp loo xam ne defoon nañ ko ci wàlli luwaa bi luy wàññi doole Jammeh ci jaay doole ci wàlli taxawaayam yooyu yëpp dañ ko génnee.
Very much so, and if allowed, I would just repeat the point I made earlier.
Wow.
We're talking about where a judge, including the Chief Justice, could be removed anytime.
Waaw bu fekkee nag may nga ma rek ma delluwaat rek ci ponk bi nga xam ne moom laa fi gënoon a leeral rek gën koo digëral bu fekkee ne George di attekat bu mag bokk na sax ne ki nga xam ne moo jiite attekat yëpp di chief justice bi mën nañ koo xëy rek génnee
head of the National Assembly Speaker, who also the president could remove anytime he wanted.
Ki nga xam ne moo jiite néegi député yi tamit bu fekkee tamit président man maa xëy rek génne ko.
And we talk about the legislature being a co-equal branch of government.
te bu fekkee ne buntu bi saytu wàlli loi bi mooy beneen bànqaas la boo xam ne nii am naa geneen bànqaas yi ci doxalinu réew.
And of course, vice president, ministers, in the case of the ministers, not vetted. In the case of the vice president, not elected.
ci bu fekkee ne ki topp ci moom vice président bi nekku ne dañ ko tànn comme moom ak ministre yi bu fekkee ne jaarale wuñ leen ci yoon bañ leen naay indi ndax moom mooy seet rek tànn ko neex.
So I would say 100% control.
kon nag dinaa xam naa leen wax ne xaaji téeméer bu nekk téeméer yi yëpp la ci am.
But it's even worse, much worse than that, in view of the supposed immunity clauses that they put into the Constitution.
Why loolu bentay gën naa bon sax ci li nga xam ne moo di maanaam ni kiiraay bi nga xam ne moom lañ jël dugal ko ci biir li nga xam ne moo di wàlli luwaa bi.
I would agree. The draft did not have any immunity clause, but if you look at the second schedule to the 97 Constitution, you would find a few provisions that give not only the AFPRC, even the government at the time, immunity of what was called official acts. Yes.
Waaw
that's right.
bu ñu ñëwee rek ci mbir moom mooy immunité nga xam ne nii mooy def dara te kenn du ko topp loolu rek feeñutoon ci buntu boobu noonu rek waaye nag ci APRC de waaye nag ñi nga xam ne nii tamit sax ñu ngi leen liggéey ci nguur gi ci jamono boobu.
And if you allow me, I also wanted to emphasize, not only did we have immunity clauses inserted in the draft, those clauses were made unamendable. Let me repeat, unamendable, as in, if you look at the Constitution, there is a part, 97 Constitution, that says the National Assembly cannot even look into changing these provisions. So not just entrenched, but unamendable.
bu ko defee rek am na xat yooyu noonu nekkul nag xat boo xam ne dañ ko tënk ne boo ko waree wécci da nga war a jaaraat ca wote day daal waaw waaye bii am na si xat yoo xam ne nii dañ koo teg ne kenn mënut koo roxandi kenn mënut koo génne loolu léegi député yi sax.
Live from Banjul, this is GRTS News at 1300 hours, broadcasting for viewers in the Gambia and around the world. On the top of the news this hour, the British High Commission and Great Institute meet stakeholders to discuss the country's environmental monitoring system. Making history in the healthcare system, Gambians hail the efforts of Dr. Keba Marena and team for conducting the first ever knee replacement surgery in the country. The orthopedic surgeon joins us in the news for an exclusive on that historic break. And joining forces to fight tobacco use, the Ministry of Health partners with the Africa Center for Tobacco Control to raise awareness on the effects of smoking amid COVID-19 and tuberculosis. In sports, the presidency hosts a special state dinner for the Scorpions of the Gambia as the country celebrates their great performance and historic qualification to the 2021 African Cup of Nations. In the U.S., the trial of Derek Chauvin continues on day 3 with witnesses recalling the final moments and events leading to the death of George Floyd. Elsewhere, the hate crime unit of the New York Police Department launches investigations into a new video in circulation amid a spike in anti-Asian violence. Well, that's the top of the news and much more coming in just a moment. Thanks for staying with us. I am Marian Jai Ajayi. Well, beginning with legislative matters, Wednesday's ordinary session at the National Assembly saw deputies engaging cabinet ministers on issues affecting various sectors. The Minister of Lands, Environment and Agriculture Minister joined lawmakers to respond to questions on activity reports earlier submitted to the Assembly. Aissatou Gassama has more in this report.
The Minister for Lands and Regional Government was the first to be called on the podium to answer questions. The NAM for Ilyasa asked the Minister to provide the Assembly with the breakdown of the spending of $250 million in the Community Development Emergency Program. On the environment, climate change and natural resources, deputies asked about the Ministry's plan to regenerate Dobo Forest, stop the ongoing encroachment at Tambi Forest, and the number of bushfires that occurred during the last 4 years.
Madam Speaker, the Department of Forestry has plans to regenerate the Dobo Forest Park as part of its restoration efforts in the nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement that we are currently reviewing. The department will receive support from the World Bank, budget support for operationalizing the nationally determined contribution to convert the Dobo Forest Park into a plantation. In 2019, there was one fire outbreak, and in 2020, there was one fire outbreak. So the total fire outbreak for the 4 years for West Coast region is 174, for Lower River region 53, for Central River region North 58, for Central River region South 39, Upper River region 122, and North Bank region 129, and technical unit 2. Thank you.
Agriculture Minister Ami Fabre was the third to answer questions.
Wouldn't the Honorable Minister see the linkage between the production of groundnuts and the processing into oil? And what does she have to say regarding the benefit economically? Would it be to process the groundnuts and sell the oil, or to maintain a groundnut sector which only sell the raw groundnuts without processing? What is the policy of the government with regard to that?
To sell the raw groundnut, that means we're looking in for the foreign exchange, so that Gambia can have a lot of foreign exchange. And if we process into crude oil also, we can also provide the local market. They will also have quality oil. I think that's a very good point. I will try to consider that as a ministry.
Minister Fabre was also asked on the status of the implementation of the court decision on the 2016 fertilizer scandal at her ministry and the level of implementation of the small ruminant project.
For livestock drinking facilities to be constructed by the Ministry of Agriculture in the Jimara constituency. Within the framework of the small ruminant production enhancement project, Sarenjobu cluster has been identified for the construction of a livestock drinking facility, solar-powered borehole with overhead tank and trunk. This will serve both the cattle and the small ruminants in the cluster of the villages.
Aissatou Gassama, GRTS.
Let's now turn to climate change matters because the British High Commission in the Gambia has partnered with Great Institute, a climate change advocacy organization, to organize a day-long stakeholder meeting on the Gambia's environmental monitoring system. The eco-monitoring scheme seeks to improve the country's resilience in the fight against climate change. Baba Silla has more on that report.
Climate change remains a global challenge which is affecting every country, particularly developing nations who are struggling to increase adaptivity via climate change agreements engaging collective action. In the Gambia, young people have joined the effort with local environmental advocacy group, Gambia Environmental System, partnering with the British High Commission to find new ways to come up with long-term strategies to address a growing climate challenge. The British High Commissioner David Belgroup, who joined this young climate activist, outlined the UK stand on climate change and what needs to be done to find a lasting solution to the global threat.
Climate change and green recovery is central to the UK agenda, and this is made even more so by the fact that this year we'll be hosting the COP26 talks later this year, towards the end of this year. Sea levels will keep rising as the polar ice sheets and glaciers melt and the warming seas expand. Coastal cities, such as Banjul, with dense populations, are particularly vulnerable, especially those that can't afford flood protection. The UK has played a key role in securing the 2015 Paris Agreement, where for the first time 195 countries adopted the first ever universal and legally binding global climate deal.
The top British diplomat is, however, optimistic that the day-long gathering will create opportunities and expand collaboration between stakeholders to address climate change. Mbai Jaba is the permanent secretary at the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources.
The Gambia, being one of the world's climate leaders, is among countries that are highly vulnerable to climate change impacts, despite the fact that it emits less to global greenhouse gases. This, however, can be attributed to a lot of factors such as limited resources to finance climate change impacts, the low-lying nature of our settlements, including the capital Banjul, coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion in rice fields, flooding, and increase in intensity of heat on the Earth's surface.
Permanent Secretary Jabon also advised organizers to reach out to the government and its agencies in order to define long-term solutions for climate change. Changing weather patterns are immensely challenging communities whose lives and livelihoods are facing new threats from climate change. For Grts News, I am Baba Silla.
Now, the Ministry of Health has joined forces with the Center for Tobacco Control in Africa in a 4-day caravan raising awareness on tobacco use and smoking, boosting preventive measures against tuberculosis and COVID-19. The awareness campaign targets Region 1 and Region 2. Ibrahim Jallo reports.
By the Ministry of Health in partnership with the Center for Tobacco Control in Africa.
This is a 2-in-1 awareness campaign. Health officials kick off a sensitization caravan highlighting the risk factors and consequences of tuberculosis and COVID-19. The message clearly discourages smoking, which according to experts, and compromises the immune system of smokers. Campaigners display posters in public places for visibility. Ngali Abubakar Sambu is the Regional Director of Health Services for West Coast Region. He said smoking kills thousands of people annually. Hence, the need to control the use of tobacco to limit the chances of contracting tuberculosis and COVID-19.
Every year, so many thousands of people may be dying in this country due to smoking. Not only about COVID-19, but of course, the exposure of smokers, of course, in COVID is more serious. And of course, we are not relenting on the fight against tuberculosis. Yes, but definitely a smoker is even more prone to catch the disease of tuberculosis. So we are not relenting, although more resources are spent on COVID-19 prevention and control because it kills more people.
Senabu Bicham, Program Officer, Non-Communicable Disease Unit and Tobacco Control at the Ministry of Health, said tobacco is addictive and that it takes time for one to quit smoking. According to her, the awareness campaign is paying off for good.
Quitting smoking is a process. So this caravan also happened last year. So most of the time, if we go to places that we have gone to, at least we have seen people that now tell us about the danger signs of tobacco use, like what we told them, and that they are trying to quit, and some have already, they are on the way. Because you know, it's addictive, so it takes a lot of time. So it's actually paying dividend.
Tuberculosis and COVID-19 are major killer diseases globally. In the Gambia, health authorities and partners resort to sensitizing the public about the dangers of smoking as a risk factor. Ibrahima Jallo, GRTS News.
And now, staying with health issues, it's a historic moment in the Gambia as the orthopedic team at the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital conducts its first ever knee replacement surgery. That's a national first led by orthopedic surgeon Dr. Keba Marena. The breakthrough is a major achievement for the Gambia and the country's premier hospital that goes down in the country's medical history. We are joined in our studio by Dr. Keba Marena to tell us more about this landmark achievement.
And welcome to GRTS News.
Thank you for having me.
Now, how challenging was this as a medical procedure we've never done before?
So it's a fairly complicated procedure, but as I've said before, in many places it's a routine procedure. But doing it for the first time with a new team does make it that little bit more difficult, and also not having a full amount of equipment can make it more difficult surgery.
Okay.
But for the patient, it's a life-changing surgery.
Okay, like what I just wanted to say, like in other countries, this naturally happens on a daily basis. What's the reason behind the late introduction of this procedure in the country?
There's two reasons. One reason is the expertise. We don't have many orthopedic surgeons like myself. I myself came back just over 2 years ago. The other thing is cost. So even though the patient doesn't pay for the operation, they still have to buy the equipment, which costs at least $110,000.
So let's look at what brought you back home to serve. It's been many years of hard work that has helped to greatly transform the EFSTH and the medical surgery generally. In retrospect, have we made any meaningful progress in healthcare?
I think we're making progress. It is happening slowly. For those of us there, of course, we'd want it to happen faster. It can be frustrating while you're seeing it. But if you look back to where we were maybe 5 years ago, I think we're making progress. But we do healthcare, something that people want and they want it now. It's not something you can have happen very slowly. But because we're so behind in many ways, especially in terms of personnel, it takes time to train a surgeon to full specialization. It can take 10 years or more. So that's not going to happen overnight. We have to start investing in it now to get the surgeons of the future.
Okay. So finally, what do you think should be done to make pave way for better service delivery in the healthcare system of the country?
I think maybe more attention needs to be paid to it. Healthcare nowhere in the world is free, and it does take some investment, whether that's from an insurance scheme or from government. But we have to put more money into it to get what we want out of it. It's not free anywhere, and it costs a lot of money, as you can see from the cost of this procedure alone.
So how was it like for you and your team?
It was a very successful surgery. I think seeing the face of the patient afterwards, the patient being so happy, being out of pain on that side at least, it makes you feel good, and also the whole team feel happy that we successfully managed to do this. As I say, for me, it's something I've done many times, but for a lot of the people involved, it was the first time they've done it. So successfully doing it, knowing we did it here at home with a team of Gambians.
That was orthopedic surgeon Dr. Keba Marena talking to GRTS's Isa Tuketa on the first ever knee replacement surgery. Now this is GRTS News. Let's head into fisheries, where the ministry is collaborating with the Food and Agriculture Organization to deliver improved technologies for smoked fish production. On Tuesday, authorities officially handed over a new cistern and solar system facility from the Trrc Fish Smoking Technology FTT site to Gunjur Women Fish Smokers. Aisatu Jata Gassama was there and now reports.
smoking technology is environmentally friendly and easy to operate. In addition to the smokehouse, FAO provides a solar system with a climate-smart facility which will help women fish smokers enhance production, get water supply, and improve health.
We provided the system with a capacity of 50,000 liters. Water is going to be provided from rain harvest. It's called rain harvest. So when the water falls on the corrugate, we have a gutter. Before it will fall down and be a waste, it will be collected through the gutter and then through the pipe at the exit there, and then it will go to the tank. And then the second water facility we provided is the borehole. You see the borehole there, because this one is during the rainy season only, but during the dry season they will have water from the borehole going to the tank. This tank is almost about 4,000 liters.
The director of fisheries, Anna Mbenga, said women in post-harvest activities faced important challenges such as food security.
I would like to take the opportunity to set light to the significant role played by women as actors of the post-harvest, both in the artisanal and industrial subsector. Fresh fish products are highly pressable on the heat, and the majority of the fish traders transport and market their fish with little or no ice due to insufficient supply. As a result, reduces the quality coupled with reduction of price of fish and profit.
Maria Mandong thanked the benefactors for the gesture. FAO Rep Sibu Ramperi recognized the role and efforts of women in national development.
The commitment of the women that are here with us today and those who work with them deserves an appreciation, simply because fish smoking is quite a challenging task for them. Our wish as the FAO is that we should help the women, we should help the community, so that as they do their work, they are able to meet the international sanitary requirements.
The Minister of Fisheries and Water Resources called on women to take ownership of the facilities and assured them of the ministry's support.
The government is going to have, with our ECOWAS projects, 4 additional fish smoking facilities for women in the country. But we hope that you will give good examples so that more and more women will be involved in fish smoking and fish export.
The program ended up with the tour of the facilities, where the keys were officially handed over to the women fish smokers. Aissatou Diatta Gassama, GRTS.
Now, a day-long regional consultation between local institutional heads and communities in the Lower River region has climaxed in Mansa Konko. The forum, organized by the Technical Advisory Committee in partnership with the Office of the President and UNDP, aims to strengthen inclusive citizens' engagement for more accountable governance. Alajimbai reports.
In 2018, the government of the Gambia conducted a survey called Conflict and Development Survey to identify key causes of conflict in the country. The survey identified lack of communication between duty bearers and right holders as a potential risk to conflict. The government responded by devising means for duty bearers to report to right holders on activities carried out by public institutions as enshrined in the National Development Plan. One of those means at regional level is a public consultation between public sector leaders and community representatives as part of the implementation of the Governance and Accountability Project. According to the Director of Coordination at the Department of Strategic Policy and Delivery at the Office of the President, Ndumbe Saho, such activities will enable government to make informed policy decisions to strengthen good governance and accountability.
This is a platform that is created to build trust and accountability between public sector leaders and the general citizen. So literally what we do here is we kind of report back. Tell them our achievement in the National Development Plan, maybe challenges if we have any in delivering the service that we should render to the public, as well as maybe, also engage the community and allow them also give us new priority areas that all these regional heads can take on board to inform their strategic plan. The outcome of this meeting is kind of a progress report, which will go back to the aligned ministry to inform policy decision about the new needs of the communities, the emerging challenges, and how they need to tackle them.
The governor of Lower River Region, Rohijon Manjang, said the interface will bridge the communication gap between duty bearers and right holders, thus reduce any potential risk of development-related conflicts.
The most important thing of this is to communicate to the right holders. We as duty bearers to communicate to the right holders as per their expectations, and of course to relate to them as to what we have covered, achieved in the last 3 months, going by the National Development Plan. It's just a matter of informing them that this is how far we've gone with the plan, and of course to discuss also our challenges where we have hitches in meeting our expectations. And the importance of this event is to also close the gap of the misunderstanding, the misconceptions, the unrealistic expectations. If people expect very high, and they tend to be building some anger in them, and it's not good for crisis management. So that's why we deem it necessary, the government deems it necessary to make sure that we report to the taxpayers, engage them as to what we have done, and of course our future plans, and of course also hear from them their expectations.
At the consultation forum, a comprehensive report showing the activities, plans, and challenges of various institutions was presented and reviewed. Various community leaders and group representatives made contributions in the document to ensure an all-inclusive approach to national development. Alajim by GRTS News.
Kanyang organization has recently held a day's peace, justice and reconciliation Bantaba at Bajakunda, Wuli East District in the Upper River region. The day-long forum, funded by Africa Transitional Justice Legacy Fund, brought together over 100 participants, mainly victims of human rights violations and their perpetrators. Our URR correspondent Seydou Kamara has more in this report.
Victims of human rights violation and their perpetrators, numbering over 100, have participated in a day-long forum organized by Kanyang Kafom with funding from Africa Transitional Justice Legacy Fund. Program was given a title, Dub Badembong, meaning family house. During the program, victims to narrate their stories, while the perpetrators acknowledged their wrongdoing and sought apology from the victims. According to the Executive Director of Kanyang Organization, Famara Jaune, the seminar seeks to provide avenues for the victims of human rights violation and their offenders to interact and seek forgiveness.
This Badimbong initiative is part of our broader transitional justice project that seeks to engage communities in the Upper River region, to be specific in the 4 districts of the region, Tumanna, Wuli West, Wuli East and Sandu districts, to bring together victims of human rights violations under the former regime and their perpetrators and opinion leaders in the community, for us to give them the platform to share their stories, the human rights violations that they've witnessed, that they've encountered during the past regime, and for the perpetrators to also listen to the victims and hopefully seek for their forgiveness. Of course, they also have to accept the fact that they've contributed to their suffering, and they seek forgiveness from them. Then from there, we move to the next level of promoting peace and then unity in the districts.
Mr. Jaune further explained that the exercise will avail victims and their perpetrators the opportunity to unite in the interest of peace.
Badimbong is the most successful project, and I can assure you that I have already discussed with my team that Badimbong is here to stay. Because of the impact that it has registered so far, Badimbong is here to stay. Even whereas this project phase out, the idea and the initiative behind the Badimbong will stay. Because we are having prominent individuals who are also bringing the Islamic perspective into the Badimbong initiative. So these are local structures of the Badimbong who are very courageous and are going to continue the work to ensure that we maintain and sustain the gains registered. But most importantly, I have realized from our records that the initiative of Badimbung has already started paying dividend in these districts and these communities. We have restored broken relationships. For me, that's the most important objective and achievement of Badimbung.
The victims of human rights violation who recalled their ordeals in the hands of their perpetrators thank Bekanyang for organizing such an important forum aimed at reconciling the parties as the country continues its healing process of numerous human rights violations which were committed during the past 22 years. Seydou Camara, reporting for Diatas News from Basse, Upper River Region.
This release from the Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Unit of the Ministry of Justice, which informs the public that it's embarking on a sensitization tour from the 22nd March 2021 to the 6th of April 2021. The sensitization tour joins efforts to end the sexual offences in the Gambia. It would also be an opportunity for the unit to meet and engage communities on legal instruments dealing with sexual and gender-based violence in the Gambia. The sensitization will also include law clinics, making lawyers available to provide legal advice to members of the respective communities. The first leg of the tour was held on Monday, the March 29th at Sintet Village, West Coast Region. This ensuring dialogue will, with members of the community, particularly raised concerns over matters relating to the reporting of sexual violence by victims. The unit also took the opportunity to explain the current developments in the country's criminal justice system, especially protection mechanisms for women and the girl child. The second and the third leg of the sensitization tour shall be held at Esso and Sabak Sanjal in the North Bank region of the Gambia. The SGBV unit, under the auspices of the Ministry of Justice, wishes to extend its highest gratitude and appreciation to the British High Commission, Banjul, for providing funding to carry out the sensitization. Well, with that, we take a break and look at sports right after. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The Scorpions have been hosted to a dinner by the government of the Gambia to celebrate and thank the players and officials for qualifying the Gambia to its maiden African Cup of Nations. The dinner was attended by several cabinet ministers and the First Lady of the Republic, Madam Fatou Barrow. MS Jallo tells us more.
First, it was the red carpet rolled out in an unprecedented gesture, and then came the state dinner, hosted for the gallant Scorpions of the Gambia, who are fresh from making history by qualifying the maiden African Cup of Nations appearance. The dinner, which was hosted at the Seafront Tamala Hotel, was attended by several cabinet ministers, senior government officials, and the Gambia Football Federation officials. The Ministers of Youth and Sports, Children Affairs, Fisheries, Information, and Tourism all graced the event, whilst President Adama Barrow was represented by the First Lady, Madam Fatou Barrow, who brought the warmest greetings and congratulatory message from the Gambian leader to the footballers.
I am happy to be part of this event. President is the #1 fan. I think I'm #2. I made the call to let him talk to GRTS. And after that, I asked him to host a dinner. And he's not around. I've been down since Friday, but I said I have to be on my feet and be part of this. I was not invited. I invited myself because I'm a football fan.
The Scorpions reached the African Cup of Nations for the first time after beating Angola 1-0 in the penultimate round of the qualifiers and finished as Group D winners. The historic achievement united the country in celebrations, with Gambians home and abroad praising the gallantry of the players throughout the qualifying rounds.
When we came into government, in cabinet, discussing sports, our president said we must put resources into sports. He had a cabinet subcommittee, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Tourism, Minister of Information, myself, chairing the committee. We must put 2% of all international call to sports development. And that is why we are able to achieve what we are achieving today. And I thank the GFF, I thank the coach, I thank the team, I thank everybody who has made a contribution to where we are today.
Government is very committed to the development of soft sports and youth empowerment in general. Government is coming in to take our responsibility as a government of providing the necessary resources to finance the activities of the teams. And we will continue to do that under President Barrow. So
the Gambia will now be among 24 African countries that will be competing in next year's African Cup of Nations in Cameroon. And the players and officials couldn't hide the feeling of finally ending more than 5 decades of the country's wait for an appearance at the continent's biggest footballing event.
We are very happy and proud Gambians, and very, very happy to be part of this great history. More than almost 70 years we have been trying. We could not make it, and thank God it happened with us. So we are very thankful and very proud of these players and the coach and the technical team.
The president of the Gambia Football Federation, Lamin Kaba Bajo, and Pap Sen, veteran sports journalist, also joined the long list of voices to congratulate the Scorpions.
What we can assure you at the Federation is that we will not stop at anything to continue journey. This is just the beginning. We are not only going to Cameroon just to go there, as somebody said, as tourists. We want to go there and come back with respectable results and performance.
The AFCON-bound players have been promised a handsome reward by government in the near future, while the gallant Scorpions have done their bit for the country. It's now what the country will do for them.
To the Scorpions.
Continue winning.
Mohamed Diallo, Grts Sports.
Now, still in sports, the mayor of the Kanifing Municipal Council, Talib Ahmed Bensouda, has presided over the presentation of a check amounting to over $1.2 million for the construction of a perimeter fence at the buffer zone in Talending. The mayor also inspected the new goal post installed at the buffer zone as part of the Goal 4 Kilometers project. Details in this report by MS Jallo.
The mayor of the Kanifing municipality kicked and scored a penalty at one of the brand new goal posts erected at the buffer zone playing ground bordering Talending and Latrikunda. Mayor Bensouda took the spot kick whilst on a visit to the buffer zone for the launching of the Goal 4 KM project, an initiative which seeks to provide goal posts at football fields within the municipality. Already, the Goal 4 KM project has installed 8 new goal posts with nets at the buffer zone, which were inspected by the mayor before he handed a check for the construction of a perimeter fence around the buffer zone. In presenting the check to the contractors, Mayor Bensouda said the over $1.2 million project is part of his council's effort to develop the buffer zone, citing the importance of the vast playing ground to the youths of the municipality. Upgrading the buffer zone, he said, is top on his agenda. Kemo Bojan, Youth Councillor, and Karamo Sise, Councillor for South Talending Ward, said the Goal 4 KM project will be expanded to other football fields within the municipality by providing goal posts. The construction of the perimeter fence is contracted to KM Youth Masons, whose managing director assured the timely completion of the works. Alhaji Ibrahim Anyasi, who is the grassroots football coordinator at the Gambia Football Federation and one of the leading football administrators in Serekunda East, commended the Kanifing Municipal Council for what he described as a brilliant initiative to develop and preserve this vital asset for the youths of the area. The buffer zone has been one of the country's main breeding grounds for Gambian football, with so many young talents passing through these sandy pitches to become professional footballers and representing the Gambia at the various categories of the national teams. But it has been neglected over the years. However, with this initiative, it will bring some hope to these young and aspiring footballers who want standard facilities to be able to realize their dreams. Mohamed Diallo, Grts Sports.
Now, a quick look at some international headlines, starting in New York, where hate crimes against the Asian Americans continues to rise. A video released this week shows an Asian man being brutally attacked in a subway train, with attackers choking him until he chose to fall unconscious. The New York Police Department Hate Crime Unit has launched an investigation into the video. William Denslow reports on the rise in anti-Asian violence.
The subway train, with the attacker choking him until he appears to fall unconscious. And the New York Police Department's Hate Crimes Unit has launched an investigation into the video. William Denslow reports on the rise in anti-Asian violence.
I'm standing outside an apartment building on 43rd Street, right in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, and it is outside this building where at around 11:40 local time in the morning on Monday, a surveillance video showed a suspect kicking a 65-year-old Asian woman to the ground, stomping on her repeatedly. Now, according to the Associated Press, this woman is hospitalized with serious injuries. Now, according to police, they say that the suspect made anti-Asian statements. According to local media here in New York, the man was heard saying, quote, "You don't belong here." Now, this video also appears to show a witness to this attack from inside this apartment building seemingly closed the door behind him instead of going out to help the witness, to help the victim who was on the floor outside. Now, we've heard from New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio. He said that this incident was, quote, "absolutely disgusting." He has urged New York's residents not to stand around if they witness such attacks taking place.
I'm very frustrated by these attacks. It's horrible. It's disgusting to see people, put into such a horrible situation. The fear that's been created. It's so unfair to Asian New Yorkers.
And this attack just comes days after protests were held here in New York City and across the United States, with numbers of demonstrators across these major cities speaking out against the rise in violence against the Asian American and Pacific Islander populations here in the United States. We've also heard from President Joe Biden, of course, in Atlanta in the wake of those 8 people died in Atlanta, 6 of whom were Asian women. He had called on Congress to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. He is now going even further. He is really introducing a raft of measures to try and get to grasp with this rise in anti-Asian attacks in the United States. He is reinstating the White House initiative on the Asian American Pacific Islander community, also calling on the Department of Justice to launch a cross-agency initiative and to fund further research when it comes to understanding why we're seeing this rise in violence against this community. According to Stop AAPI Hate, there have been around 3,800 reported incidents of violence against this community over the past year. They say that this urgently needs to be addressed. William Denslow, CGTN, in Midtown Manhattan.
Before we end this edition of GRTS News, a recap of our top stories once again. The British High Commission and Great Institute have met stakeholders to discuss the country's environmental monitoring system. Making history in the healthcare system, Gambians are hailing the efforts of Dr. Keba Marena and team for conducting the first ever knee replacement surgery in the country. The orthopedic surgeon joined us in the news for an exclusive on that historic break. And joining forces to fight tobacco use, the Ministry of Health has partnered with the Africa Center for Tobacco Control to raise awareness on the effects of smoking amid COVID-19 and tuberculosis. In sports, the presidency has hosted a special state dinner for the Scorpions of the Gambia as the country celebrates their great performance and historic qualification to the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations. In the U.S., the trial of Derek Chauvin continued on the day 3 with witnesses recalling the final moments and events leading to George Floyd's death. Elsewhere, the hate crime unit of the New York Police Department has launched investigations into a new video in circulation amid a spike in anti-Asian violence. Well, that was all in this edition of the news at 1300 hours. From me and the rest of our team, we thank you for watching and do join us at 2000 hours for more news.
Provided for the absolute majority system. In other words, before we elect you into office as president, you had to win 50% plus one of the total votes cast. That was provided for in Section 48, absolute majority.
Wow, li mooy kat yi nga xam ne nii moom lañ teg nag ci mbiri falu teg président gannaaw boo xamee ñu ngi def wote moom bokk na ci tamit ne xaaji téeméer bu ne ci ñi wote juróom fukk yi war nga koo am lu teg benn balaa ngaay falu.
I think that went on until 2003 when another amendment was made to the Constitution. You know, people would say that might have been informed by by how close. I don't know, the 2001 elections were? Yes.
Loolu nag ñëw na ba atum 2003 gannaaw boo xamee ni def nañ beneen roxandeku ci luwa bi mooy ci wote 2001 jegeyante gi nga xam ne ni amoon na.
Okay, sorry. The 2003 change meant we substituted absolute majority with simple majority. Whoever got the most votes would be named president. I remember when we went around the country, CRC, in Maninka they say Lekona Tamu, in Wolof they say Raugad.
Yeah. Ci wote boobu nag mooy ñi nga xam ne noonu lañ tëddalee rek mooy doxalinu Raugad mooy daal ki ëppale rek ci carte yi sànni moom mooy falu.
You said this was informed by how close. Well, it is said that this was informed by how close the 2001 election results were. Yeah. Let's try to dissect that a little bit. Is it that the calculus was that Jammeh probably would not have attained 50% plus one vote because of the closeness of the 2001 results. So he feared he would not get 50 plus one, so he changed the system to whosoever leads would win.
ndax xam sax mën nañoo wax ne ndax Jammeh dafa tiitoon ci carte bi ni mu jegeñantee woon ci niñ ëppalantee woon ci 2001 election bi loolu moo tax nag ba bu wecci mbir yi ndaxte dafa xalaat ne du mun a am ci carte yi téeméer bu nekk juróom fukka bu teg benn moo tax mu wecci mbir yi ne daal ku raw tuuti rek sax ku raw gàddu daal yaa kii nekk président.
That must have been the case, and the change still means you can have a president who might have won just about 20% of total
votes cast.
Waaw loolu moo nekk rek
Minority.
mun nga am président boo xam ne nii mun naa gagné suñu seetee carte yi ñu compté bu ci amee ñaar fukk yu ko yoo xam ne rawee na ko sax nit.
But that would also lead to questions, profound questions of legitimacy.
Loolu nag ben tey ñu mun na tax nit ñi laajte ndax loolu jaadu na.
I would say that. I still remember very vividly when we went around the country, our consultations. I think this happened in Kuntaya. After we explained what absolute majority meant, what simple majority meant, I remember one of those who were at the meeting saying, you know, in Wolof, it's still, you know, I still remember very, yes. That was in Kuntaya. Yeah.
And there were still further changes?
Yes.
Unopposed candidates?
Unopposed candidates, yes. If that also was inserted in 2003, saying if there was no opposing candidate, you know,
the sole candidate
would be
declared president.
Waaw mooy nekk rek bu fekkee ne amul kenn ku la dingat ci jamono boobu ki nga xam ne ni moom moo taxaw rek kooku dañ koy yóbbaale moo gagné.
And there was also a change to the number of ministers.
Amoon na it wecceeku buñ defoon ci ñaat limi minister yi.
That's right. Maybe I'm not sure I addressed that in my write-up, but before I talk about the ministers, I think, is it section 63, if I am not mistaken? Very interesting. Maybe I would talk about the ministers. The change was made in 2009. Just to give you a sense of how confusing it was, even for us lawyers, to tell what version of the Constitution we should rely on. We were not sure at some point. I would give an example. Is it 60?
63 talks about the tenure of the president.
Yes. The 97 Constitution in its original form provided anyone voted into office would be sworn in the day after the term of the incumbent expires.
Loolu nag mu ngi wane tamit ne képp koo xam ne nii moom lañ woteel ba mu gagné dañ lay fal benn bés bu gannaaw bés bi nga xam ne nii diir bi nga xam ne nii ka fa nekkoon mandaam jeex na ci beneen bés bi ñu fal la yow.
I think in 2001 that was changed to say 60 days
after the elections.
Waaw loolu nag ci atum 2001 wecci nañ ko mooy nekk ne juróom benn fukki guddi gannaaw wote bi mooy ñaari weer.
Unfortunately, that's the version you have online.
Tey tamit nag loolu moo nekk di dow.
I remember I was contacted during the impasse by some international institution to advise on what the proper position was. I didn't know, so I referred them to the wrong law, just to realize eventually that that position was actually changed later.
Yeah, loolu nag am na jenn jamono ci jamono féewaloo politique bi fi amoon di impasse bi ci diggante wàcc ak wàccuma ak falute gi.
So 97 saying after the term of the incumbent expires, 2001 changed to say 60 days, and I think in 2009 they had it changed to go back to 2006. Sorry, they had it changed to go back to what it was in 97. So it was, you know, so
and it was so that important for him to decide the date a new president assumes office.
That's right.
Loolu sa amoon na solo ci moom nga xam ne dina mun a tànn ban bés la président bu bees bi di tàmbali liggéeyam.
Now let's talk about.
Witness, did you say the day after the expiry of the incumbent term, or the day of an expiry itself, not the day after?
No,
otherwise you would have the hiatus.
The day after the term of the incumbent expires. As in, sorry, at the expiry of the term of the incumbent. Yeah, so that would mean there is no, there's no gap. Right. But for me, I'm making this point in the sense, even lawyers struggle to know what the relevant law at the time was, because some of these changes were not publicized. You know, so it was a big problem. And yeah, to your question on the number of ministers, until 2009, we had a provision which provided that the number of ministers, including attorney generals, should not exceed 15. In 2009, that was changed, and the section now says, you know, as many ministers as the president deems fit.
ci atum 2009 waxoon rek ne boole ci sax di officier buntu ki ministre bi saytu wàlli loi ak àtte ci réew mi warta weesu fukki ministre ak juróom waaye mujjee gi daal wane nañ rek ne daal lim bi dem rek ba li nga xam ne ni moo soob président bi.
Even though this provision could be abused, in my view, it looks like it is the only progressive amendment that has been made to the Constitution, because at least it allows the President to appoint other ministers, create other ministries if it is deemed necessary, especially in view of the changing times that we experience.
dafa mel ni bii rek mooy soppale bi nga xam ne mu ngi dox ndaxte moo tax nag ba dooleel président bi pour moom mu tànn rek ministre bi lim bu ko doy rek mu def ko ci ministre bi.
I would say that, I would say, honestly, that a lot of the provisions were very self-serving.
Yes, including this one, of course.
Yes, yes, yes. A lot of the changes I meant.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And there were also amendments to other laws which had an impact on the Constitution.
am na sax yeneen soppali yoo xam ne def nañ ko ci wàlli loi bi.
Maybe just one other point I wanted to make. That wasn't direct, but a very indirect change to an entering clause. Because if you look at Section 26 of Constitution, I think 24.9, it provides for one's right to elect to be tried by a jury. We don't have jury trials in the Gambia, but that is a constitutional right. And it is contained in our fundamental human rights section. And important for me to point out that everything in Chapter 4, which deals with fundamental rights, lies in our Bill of Rights, is entrenched. Entrenched meaning to change any part of it, we needed to have a referendum. But some years later, in 2001, they came up with an amendment providing when the High Court sits, it shall be constituted by a single judge, making it mandatory. So what happened to your right to elect to be tried by jury? So it was, but people don't talk about that, but it was very clever, indirect way of, making sure our rights as provided for limited.
It is said that this was in reaction to the Landing Sane case, who had, when he was arrested and arraigned before the High Court, asked to be tried by jury. And there was no system.
Landing Sane bi nga xamne ñu ko yobon ci attekay bu mag bi ne ñi ko wara atté fa wara nek ay nit ñoo xamne dañ leena tan pour taaj ñu atté dogal bi.
Well, the change cannot be valid in the sense a right you have to elect to be tried by jury cannot be taken away. To do that, we needed to have a referendum on the issue.
Wow, tan mo na manatona deggu nak lu aju ci walé né foxé nga am jury ndek foxé mu warona jaar ci wote waaw wala déet bañ wala nangu di referendum.
But certainly the change, well, whether unconstitutional or not, remained in the Constitution, and in fact that is how we are still proceeding, because there are no trials by jury in this country.
Very much so, yes.
Loolu ba léegi nag mu ngi des ci constitution bi ne moom la ñoo jëfee digal la nag àndut ak loi bi waaye terewul ba tey moom la ñoo doxee.
Are there any other issues in the Constitution that are of serious concern to you?
Ndax am na leneen loo xam ne mu ngi nekk ci constitution bi loo xam ne itteel na la torop.
I mean, there are lots more, and of course, I just gave some examples.
Am na yu bari mooy rek misaal yi nga xam ne ni joxe naa ko.
That were made. Maybe just to, I have heard, you know, normally when people talk about whether we need to have a new constitution, we don't, I hear people say, we would have been okay if, I mean, we can't, well, you know, all we needed to do was just to amend the 1997 constitution. Maybe this is a very good opportunity for me to explain a few things.
Waaw loolu nag li mu fi wax rek moo nekk ne léegoo-léeg am na ñuy wax ne ndax mënuñoo na amaat loi bu ees ñenn ñi wax ne déedéet moom kañ li nañ doyloo bii rek comme su fekkoon ne am na yenn lu ñu roxandi tuuti rek ci loi 1997 mu ne nag bii nag ubbil na ko bunta pour nag mu mun a waxtaan lu tuuti lu aju ci loolu.
Earlier on, I talked about the constitution having provisions that are made unamendable.
Bu njëkk waxoon naa ne ci loi bi am ay yenn xat yoo xam ne nii mënuñ koy roxandi mënuñ koy wecci.
I also talked about provisions that are entrenched.
Wax naa itamit ci yenn xat yoo xam ne nii dañ leen tënk.
Just to remind us, if we to change even a word or a clause in any of the entrenched clauses, we would have gone through the procedure the draft went through.
Bu fekkee nag ne sax dañ bëgg a wecci lu tuuti ci xat yooyu nga xam ne ni dañ leen tënk foog si rek ñu jaaraat fi ñu war jaaroon ca bu njëkk mooy ci wote dabaata lile wote déet ak waaw bañ ak nangu di référendum.
So I see no reason why you should go for 10 when you can get 100.
Bu ko defee nag moom mënut a gis ban lan dalil bu fekkee ne mën ngaa am fukk bu fekkee mën ngaa am téeméer ngay dawali fukk.
Thank you. Yes, yeah.
That's right. And there are other problems.
Am na yeneen jafe-jafe nag.
Say, for instance, the law on bail.
Loi nga xam ne moom lañ tëral ci wàlli bail.
Yes, my learned friends before me gave a lot of, they gave very good factual information. It was more or less like the practical application of the law on bail. I just wanted to give maybe some perspective as to the law on bail. If, in fact...
well, Mr. So, just a second, let me confer with the chair. Mr. Chair, I would need some 10, 15 more minutes to finish. Do we continue and then end it and finish by, say, 2:15 to 20, or do we take a break and come back?
No, you may proceed. That's going to be the end of the testimonies for the day.
Yes.
Splendid. Please continue.
Thank you. Proceed, please.
Thank you. In 2002,
atum 2002,
a change was made to our criminal procedure code, specifically Section 99.
wecceeku boobu réew ñu ko façon rek ci suñ criminal code bi ci Section 9.
And the change provided that if you are charged with an offense punishable with death or life imprisonment, you are not entitled to bail in any form.
Bu fekkee nag ne dañ la tuumaal tefaar boo xam ne nii la ciy dogal bi mooy dañ la war a rey wala dañ la war a tëj sa giidi dund kon nag amuloo benn yelleef lu aju ci wàlli ñu bail la.
Which had very serious consequences.
moo xam ne boobu nga xam ne ni am na ay lu bari loo xam ne ni nattu la ci.
We know there were a few treason trials.
xam nañ ni am na yenn ay atte yu bari ñu ko doon def fi lu aju ci wàlli suufu nguur.
And we also should note that treason under Gambian law is punishable with death, meaning if you're charged with treason, no bail for you.
bu ko defee rek ñu xam ne itamit ne mbiri suufu nguur nag tuuma la boo xam ne nii atte ba mën nañ laay rey te kon bu boobaa nag amuloo benn yelleef pour ñu jox la bail.
I think it's also important to note under our law we have an offense called concealment of treason.
te itamit ci suñ loi bi am nañ fa it benn loi boo xam ne ni mu ngi wane mooy yëg ne suufu nguur am na yow nga noppee ko.
And concealment of treason is charged. Is punishable with life imprisonment.
te itamit loolu nga xam ne ni noppee lu aju ci wàlli déggoo yi suufu nguur moom it liñ koy mbugal bi rek wala yar ba duma ba mooy ñu tëj la sa giidi dund.
So which meant every time there was any treason, any attempted treason, people could be rounded up and locked up.
bu ko defee nag bu fekkee ne am na benn jamono boo xam ne nii yëfi tefaari suufu nguur am na nit ñi mën leen a téye leen.
And they were not entitled to bail. They could be locked up, pre-trial detention for long periods of time.
kon bu boobaa itamit nag duñ am bail mën nañ leen a teg benn place ba seen atte bi di jeex ci diir bu yàgg nag.
Of course, Mr. Marena, my learned seniors, Mboch and Tambi to give examples, so I really don't need to repeat what they said. But it was a tool available to the government at the time. It wouldn't matter. They just wouldn't have you taken to court at the police level. They can have you charged and they will dump you somewhere for long periods of time, and you really couldn't go anywhere for bail.
am na suma nawle yoo xam ne ni jaar nañ fi rek wax ci ay sant yoo xam ne nii nag bugguma see delluwaat waaye nag nekkoon nañ jëfandu boo xam ne ni nguur gi ñu ngi ko doon jëfandoo dal di la jàpp rek teg la diir bu yàgg rek ci fii ba ba nga ko attee.
There was another change made to the criminal procedure code.
am na beneen wecceeku boo xam ne ni ñu ngi ko jëloon nag lu aju ci wàlli criminal procedure code bi.
That might have been, I think, around 2001. The code, CPC, criminal procedure codes, as it were, provided for bail pending appeal, as in, if you're taken before a magistrate, convicted, you decide to go on appeal, the law allowed you to apply for bail, and in deserving cases, you could be released on bail.
bu fekkee nag ne atte nañ la ci yenn jamono te nga bëggoon a d'appel atte boobu noonu lu waa may na la itamit nga bindu ne pour ñu may la bail ba jamono boo xam ne nii motal nga sa d'appel boobu.
That part was deleted too.
boobu wàllu woowu nag dañ ko génne woon.
I remember I was a magistrate at the time, and we would say they had in mind, I think, I'm not sure whether it had to do with around the time some, so-called politicians were standing trial before some of our courts. But, bail pending appeal, like I said, in deserving cases made it possible while your case is being heard by the High Court for you to go to court. But that, was taken away.
ci jamono boobu nag magistrate la attekat la te tamit jamono boobu wone nañ ne ci ay xat ci loi bi ne moom mën ngaa am mën ngaa bail ci jamono bi nga xam ne yaa ngi d'appel sa léyo mooy na jamono boobu nga xam ne ni yenn politiciens ñi ñu ngi leen a atte waaye loolu dañ ko fa génne woon.
There are two other laws I want to talk about, yes, and then first is I have heard, submissions from lawyers before me with the economic crimes decree.
Yes.
bokk na ci tamit di economic crime decree mooy jamono boo xam ne nii wax nañ ne da nga kasaara alali nguur gi.
If you were to ask me, I would say that that is a very draconian law, and I would explain.
boobu nag nekk na loi boo xam ne loi bu soxla la waaye mu ne dana biral.
I'm not sure, because if you look at chapter 10 of our constitution, the offenses that are provided in the Economic Crimes Act, sorry, not constitution, chapter 10 of our criminal code, the offenses that are provided in the Economic Crimes Decree are equally provided. And in 1986, a change was made to our criminal procedure code. Sections 289A to H were inserted. And of course, new provisions included making it difficult for persons charged with corruption to be given bail. The changes provided if you're charged with any corruption offense, a third of whatever you're accused of stealing, embezzling, should be deposited. So very, very, maybe tough provisions. So why we needed a decree, I'm not sure.
wecceeku yooyu tamit wane na lu jëm ci wàlli bañal la bail ci jamono bi nga xamee dañ ne tuumaal lu jëm ci wàlli kasaara alal wala ak tapale waaye nag bu ñëwee tamit ci wàlli tapale alal jooju noonu ñetti xaaj ca la nga tuumaal dañ koy teg te tamit loolu la nekk na loo xam ne nii daal jafe woon na lool.
Another issue, the mandatory prison term, trial in absentia. And one other point I wanted to make is with respect to Section 2 of that law, the way a public body is defined.
Lu jëm ci wàlli atte boo xam ne nii tamit dañ la atte te nekkoo fi ak tamit nag diir bi nga xam ne nii moom lañu ci teg.
as in embezzling funds belonging to a public body. Section 2 defines public body not only to include government bodies, institutions, but also to include companies government has shares in or pecuniary interest in, which is extremely broad.
Bu ko fay tamit nag emu rek ci kasaara alali nguur gi waaye kasaara yi tamit alal joo xam ne nii mu ci buntu liggéeykaay yoo xam ne yu mel ni ki compagnie wala sax yoo xam ne nii genn wàll gi nguur gi la genn wàll gi di doxal boppam wala tamit foo xam ne sax nguur gi am na fa benn aajo boo xam ne ñu ngi ko faa yundu.
I'm need to understand, I'm not sure if, like government has interest in Trust Bank, for example, Social Security with shares, which means a clerk found stealing maybe $500 can be charged with an economic crime.
Li ko mel ni ki comme sant yoon yi mu joxe fii rek mooy comme nguur gi am na aajo ci banque bu mel ni Trust Bank wala Social Security mu am fa wàll benn clerk jël fa rek lu toll ci juróomi téeméer.
I would call that stealing by servant, and I think that is adequately covered in our code. And one other law I find...
Mr. So, you would realize also that the timing of the passage of this law spoke volume about Jammeh's intentions in coming up with this law.
Thank you. And I tamit ne jamono ji nga xamee ne ci lañ doon doxal loi boobu nag ànd na ak doxalini Jammeh pour ñu doxal wàlli loi boobu.
I would agree, yes.
Danaa ci ànd waaw.
And this was a time when Jammeh was really hunting after the so-called corrupt members of the previous regime, the Jawara administration.
Mooy jamono ji nga xamee ne Jammeh mu ngi doon rëbb ñi nga xam ne ooyee na leen ne ay njublang lañ te nekkoon ci jamonoy nguuri Jawara.
That's right.
And we had commissions of inquiry that were going on. And this economic crimes decree was supposed to be the vehicle for the prosecution of many of those people who were before those commissions.
That's correct.
So talking about self-serving legislation, this was also one of them.
Pour nag bu ñoo wax nag mbiri ay loi yoo xam ne pour doxalal ko pour boppam la benn ci ñoom bokk na ci.
I would agree. In fact, our colleagues who testified before you suggest that this legislation was one of the most abused legislations, which was used as a vehicle to put away Jammeh's opponents.
Lii yëpp man na jumtuwaay la boo xam ne rek dañ ko jëloon sukkandiku ci pour génnee ñi nga xam ne ñoo daan ŋàñña Jammeh.
I would agree.
And this was not the only legislation. You also had the infamous NIA Decree 45.
Amul rek ci biir nag de bokk na ci di loi bi nga xam ne NIA moom lañ tëraloon ñu di ko wax Decree 45.
Yes, I have done a few presentations, I think, there on the decree. I would say draconian, vague, broad, giving broad powers to the NIA in a sense, and of course, as I speak to you, it is still the law. The law says the NIA can look into serious crimes, not just espionage, etc., matters of intelligence, but serious crimes. That can even mean getting involved in theft cases the police should ordinarily look into. And if you also look at the law, the Director General, I need to understand they have adopted a policy, of course, since the change, making sure people are charged. I mean, they don't get involved in those kind of crimes. But at the end of the day, it is still the law. It can be used today, it can be used tomorrow until change. If you look at the law, the Director General is given powers to issue a search warrant. That's a judicial function. You know, that hasn't changed. That has very, very wide powers. And very interestingly too, if you are aggrieved with the NIA under the law, you cannot go to court. You report to the President. The President would then name a High Court judge to be sole commissioner, whatever that is. The High Court judge will look into the allegation and submit recommendations to the President. So, you know, in law we say that is more or less like taking away the powers of the court to look into you know.
And it's also Nemajudex in Kausaswa because the president is the head of the NIA.
Exactly, yeah.
And he is the head of the very institutions whose acts are being challenged.
That's right, yes. It's still there, it's still there.
The NIA decree is a terrible one, but there is also another interesting provision.
NIA nag ñoom loi boobu ñu tëraloon bu doy waar la waaye ba tey am na beneen.
We had previous to 1997, we had a parliamentary system.
Yes.
Bala 1997 nag amoon na ay doxalin yu am ci néegi député yi.
And one important feature of that parliamentary system was that this was in fact prior to 1970, the Prime Minister was elected from the head of the party that had the highest number of representation in Parliament.
Jamono jooju sax balaa luwaa yi ñu doon doxal atum 1997 ki nga xam ne mooy Prime Minister bi ñu ngi ko war a tànnee ci ñi nga xam ne ñoo ëpp karta yi nga xam ne moom lañ leen sànni. And
the Prime Minister was therefore given the power to dissolve Parliament.
The Prime Minister bi joxoon nañ ko doole nag pour mu tas li nga xam ne mooy néegi député yi.
So that if his authority were to be challenged, he could go for snap election, could dissolve Parliament, go for snap elections, and a new Prime Minister or a new mandate is obtained.
Nga xam ne luñ dingal rek ci ay mbiri doxalina mun naa def oote bu jàmpa rek boo xam ne dina ci mun a wécci ni nga xam ne noonu la bëgg a wéccee néegi député yi.
That's a feature of the parliamentary system of government, yes.
But in 1997, we had a presidential system.
1997, nag ñu am beneen anami doxalin.
That's correct, because the CRC at the time indicated we needed separation of powers.
Exactly.
Ministers couldn't be parliamentarians,
Exactly.
etc. Yes.
So Parliament had its mandate, 5 years after every election, and President had his mandate 5 years after every election.
Néegi ñi nga xam ne ñoom lañ tànn ci néegi député yi war nañu fa nekk diiri juróomi at gannaaw buñ ko ootalee ba pare président bi tamit juróomi at la war a toog gannaaw buñ ko ootalee.
But look at this provision. Listen to this. Section 96. It says there shall be a general election of all members of the National Assembly.
li ñu wax nag ci loi boobu mooy ne war nañoo oote sànni carte pour képp koo xam ne war nañ laa tànn ci néegi député bi.
Which shall be held 4 months after the election of the office of the president.
nga xam ne dañ ko war a def ñeneenti weer gannaaw bu ñu tànnee président bi.
And then an amendment was made in 2006.
atum 2006 am soppali boo xam ne defaat nañ ko ci.
And it says,
lii la wax.
notwithstanding the provisions of subsection 1,
ak li nga xam ne moom lañ tëral ci bunti subsection 1.
the president may,
président bi mun na,
in the public interest,
ci ittey mo nit ñi,
declare by order published in the Gazette
pour feeñal ci yeneeni xibaar yoo xam ne dañ koo siiwal,
that a general election of all members of the National Assembly shall be held on such a date he or she shall determine.
ne oote bi nga xam ne moom la ñoo def ci wàllu néegi député yi dañ ko war a def rek ci bés boo xam ne moom moo koo tànn.
I must say I haven't seen that in the constitution of any country that operates a presidential system of government.
waaye loolu musuma koo gis nag ci benn loi ci àddina
You can imagine the president of Nigeria or maybe the president of the US deciding overnight to dissolve parliament.
xanaa ñu toog xalaat rek président bu mel ni bu Nigeria wala bu America toog a toog rek jàpp bés bu ñoo war a tànn député yi.
This is one of the worst amendments in the constitution.
bii nag mooy soppali bi gën a bon sax ci suñu wàlli luwaa réew mi.
So if the president senses that parliament is going to do something terrible against him,
bu président bi yëgee ci boppam rek ne député yi ñu ngi bugg a def dara loo xam ne ci kawam la war a tegu.
he sends them home.
mu daxaleen.
go and face election.
ne demal ñu ooteel leen.
That's right, and you also have to add to that the power he had to kick elected members out of parliament.
mun nga cee yokk sax tamit ne doole bi nga xam ne moom la ràngoo pour dàq sax ñi nga xam ne dañ leen tànn ooteel leen sànni leen karta.
This is the worst constitution we have ever seen in the history of this country since independence.
mooy loi bu bi gën a bon bi nga xam ne am nañ ko ci biir réew mi bañ amee independent ak léegi.
Do you agree?
ànd nga ci.
I don't know. I don't want to sound a bit biased because they would say he's rooting for the draft. But I would say it definitely has, tons of, defects, which we tried correcting. That's why it really saddens me when I hear people say the 97 Constitution is good enough to serve our purpose.
bëgguma indi benn parparloo de waaye day xam naa ne am na ci fànn yu ci bari yoo xam ne baaxul loolu tax nag dama de am naxarlu sax su ma déggee nit ñi di wax ne loi yi ñu defar atum 1997 baax na mu ngeen dox niñ ko defaree.
They say if you want to know the history of a country, look at its laws, study its constitution.
ñu ne boo bëggee xam taarixi réew seetal loi yi nga xam ne moom la réew ma di doxee.
But this constitution would teach any leader how to become a dictator.
waaye nag loi bii ñu defar nii mun naa fexe ba jur bépp njiit loo xam ne dafa doxal njiitim jaay doole ci kaw nit ñi.
The Gambian people deserve better.
réewi Gambie nag yelloo nañ leneen lu gën lii.
Would you agree?
ànd nga ci loolu.
It wouldn't just teach you. It would give you all the powers you need to be a dictator.
du la jàngal rek de waaye daf laa jox doole yépp loo xam ne dañ la ko ràng pour nga def nguuri jaay doole.
No further questions, Mr. Chair.
May I add, Chair, there is a very important law. I think, because this is the TRRC, meant to make recommendations. We have in our statute books the Indemnity Act. The Act indemnifies security agencies from any acts committed during a period of public emergency. As I speak to you, it is our law. As in, if there is a state of emergency, a period of emergency declared, and unfortunately force is used, whoever might have involved in the use of force is indemnified by that law. Whether it's good law or not, it is still in our statute books. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sow. No further questions.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Mr. Sow, for your testimony.
jërëjëf Council jërëjëf Mr. Sow ci sa kàddu yi nga fi joxe.
Jammeh is gone, the Constitution survives.
Jammeh dem na de waaye nag luwaa yi defar ci téere yi réew mi di doxee mu ngi fi ba tey.
There's quite a commentary on the country.
loolu nag leneen mbir la ci biir réew mi.
What's your take on that, Mr. Sow?
Mr. Sow, loolu yow naka nga ko gisee?
You all testified here, Council endorsed the commentary that very bad constitution, terrible provisions in it, draconian aspects of the law as well, yet the constitution is surviving. Country looks sounds stable.
ñi nga xam ne wax nañ fi yëpp wax nañ mbon gi nga xam ne moom la constitution boobu ëmba waaye nag terewul ba tey de loi boobu moom la réew mi di doxee.
I think I would just repeat what the lead counsel said. We deserve better.
danaa delluwaat rek ci li nga xam ne moom la
we can do better.
yelloo nañ leneen lu gën lii wala mën nañoo def leneen lu ko gën.
Why haven't you done better?
I don't know. I hope I wouldn't.
Not you personally, I mean the Gambia.
Yeah, I think, we all have to, change isn't just about, going around talking about there being a new Gambia or anything of that sort. The people must want change, and the political will has to be there. I'm not sure we're ready.
wecceeku boobu nag mu ngi lalu rek ci nga xam ne nit ñi nekkee nañ ci réew mi.
as a country I would say
wecceeku ndax pare nañ ni comme ni ñu bokkee réew mi.
Thank you. Commissioner, if you have any questions, please indicate. Commissioner Carr, start with you, then come to Kinte.
Thank you, Chairman.
jërëjëf Chairman.
And thank you to my teacher,
Mr. Sow. Mr. Sow.
Actually taught me at the University of the Gambia.
jàngal na ma ci University Gambia bi.
I have some questions I want to ask you. Because I am quite surprised that if you look at the situation back in, I think, 1996, with the consultation and the report of the commission.
am naa mbettute nag bu seetee li nga xam ne mooy mbir yi ni mu tëree woon atum 1996 diisoo boo xam ne def nañ ko ak commission bi.
And if you look at the consultations that your commission also did.
bu ñu seetloo tamit diisoo bi nga xam ne yow commission bi nga bokk ñoom tam def nañ ko.
I'm surprised that at the level of awareness at that time, because the issues seem to be quite similar. The issues the people raised.
yëg-yëg ba nga xam ne moo amoon jamono booba mbir yi ni moo tëree dafa mel ni dañ ñuroo.
And sometimes people say that we have an issue of awareness in the country.
léegi-léeg nit ñi dinañ wax ne nag jafe-jafe yi ñu am mooy yëg-yëg boo xam ne nit ñi am nañ ko ci eewute.
But again, in your last statement, before the end of your interaction with the lead council,
waaye sa kàddu gu mujj gi nga xam ne nag joxe woon nga ko fi.
you said we are not ready yet.
danga ne day pareeguñ.
So where is the problem?
fan la
The
jafe-jafe bi
people
wéeru.
or the leaders? Because I'm also thinking it is the people that elect these leaders to some extent.
jafe-jafe bi nekk nag ci nit ñi la wala ci njiit yi ndaxte man li ma ko gisee mooy ne nit ñi ñooy tànn njiit.
I think, just like you said, thank you, Commissioner Ka. Just like you said, we make the leaders. So then the problem is us. So I would say that's where the problem is.
And we seem to be aware, I mean, looking at the consultations, the issues that came up, and then suddenly you have leaders who would just take these issues and throw them into the dustbin and seem to have their way with us. It's difficult to reconcile these two.
dafa mel ni nag am nañ yëg-yëg bu yaatu de boo ko seetloo li nga xam ne moo faxee ko ci jokkoo bi ak diisoo yi nga xam ne def ngeen ko ak nit ñi.
I would say what didn't help was the misinformation. I still hear people making some crazy comments as to what the draft represents. I would say the comments I hear now, the comments I heard then, really gave me the impression that majority of people relied on third-party information. Majority, including so-called scholars, did not read the draft in its entirety. And I remember I appeared on a few shows and I made it clear, your understanding of the Constitution is incomplete if you do not read the report. So I think there was a lot of misinformation. I still hear that, to be honest. Yeah.
ñaka agale ay bataaxel yu mot nag dal na ci lalu itamen te dana am waxtaan yoo xam ne dana ko daan def mu ne wane na itamen ne bu fekkee ne jànguloo nag constitution report bi kon sa xam-xam du mën a mot ci loi boobu.
Thank you. The other question is regarding because we are now in a constitutional, I mean, the prospects for a new constitution are really in a limbo.
ndaxte fi mu nekk nii pour ñu am beneen constitution bu ees am na ay tënk yu ci nekk.
And you've enumerated how Jammeh and his cronies ensured that there were legal protections for some of the crimes that they committed.
wax nga fi nag ne Jammeh ak ay nitam ñoom am na kaaraange goo xam ne teg nañ ko seen boppa ci ay tafaar yoo xam ne def nañ ko.
One of the tasks that we have been given is to ensure we recommend people who bear the greatest responsibilities for prosecution.
yéen yi nag ci sas yi nga xam ne moom leen ñu teg mooy ñu feeñal ñi nga xam ne ñoom ñoo sababu mbir yi ñu jaaral leen ci yoon.
What would you say are the prospects
loo foog ne
for
nag
that to happen with the current constitution, the 1997 constitution?
loo wax nag ci mbir yi lan moo war a xew nag ci 1997 constitution bi.
I'm not sure if I will be allowed to make closing remarks. I haven't prepared anything, but I would happily address that. But at least the good thing is there was an obstacle, the immunity issue, as in even if the TRRC is to make or was to make recommendations for certain people to be prosecuted, there was always that issue as to whether whoever we should prosecute is entitled to the immunity clauses or immunity provisions in the Constitution. Well, but the good thing is we have a judgment from the Supreme Court making it clear, no immunity. But for, you know, what other thoughts I have with respect to the TRRC, if the Commission allows me in my remarks, I would maybe address that.
waaw mu ne ci bu fekkee ne rek mu jox nañ ko waxtu wi nga xam ne ni ci la war a tënk ay kàddoom dana fa waxtaan lu aju ci loolu mu ngi jëm ci wàllu immunité mooy def dara daal te kenn du la topp ci ab loi nga xam ne ni xëy na bu pencum TRRC jeexee ci ràññee fi ñuy bind dana ci bokk kan nañ war a atte ak ku ñuy atte ndax am na càngaayal kaaraange googu wala déet waaye nag dana ko wax nag lu aju ci wàll bi muy jeexal ay kàddoom.
Maybe the final question that I was going to ask could also fall within the realm of your closing remarks, and this is in regard to legal activism and its role in protection of fundamental human rights. I know you have been involved in one way or the other in that, and I would like to hear your opinions about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the knowledge you imparted in me and for the good work that you have done with Gambians and in empowering them with knowledge. I'm a beneficiary of that. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I can see you're still done now. In a good way, though, sorry. You know, I would say even before I'm invited to, I mean, I think, live in a more open society now. So the opportunities that exist for us to push for a better Gambia, maybe through litigation, through activism, we should definitely make use of. In fact, as I speak to you, my office has 2 cases against the Gambia before the African Court. One is on the validity of the Section 5 of the Public Order Act. The other with respect to the Kirmot Ali case you guys have dealt with. So I would say, you know, new opportunities, and we should definitely make use of them, particularly now that we're talking about producing many lawyers every year. So I think that's something we should look into. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Kinte, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Sow.
Mr. Sow, Commissioner Kinte la laaj.
There was a question the chairman asked, and that we couldn't have a complete answer from either you or the lead counsel regarding the 1997 or 96 draft constitution.
Dafa am laajte boo xam ne nag chairman laajte na ko fi waaye amuñ ci tontu bu leer bàyyi ko ci yow wala ci lead counsel bi mu aju nag ci luwaay yi nga xam ne moom lañ tëraloon atum 1997.
First, as a living witness, I know people did not have access to the final draft.
Ca njëlbeen man nga xam ne seede woon naa ko xam naa ne nit ñi jotuñ woon ci li nga xam ne moom lañ bindoon ca mujjanteel ga.
It wasn't well publicized, people did not access it.
Siiwaluñ ko woon de nit ñi jotuñ ci woon.
Why the unfortunate things about it were in 2 or 3 perspectives.
Li ci gën a doy waar sax ci mbir mi mooy ñaar ba ñetti fànn la.
In the first place, while the junta in particular hoarded the draft,
njëlbeen ñi nga xam ne ñooy junta bi laa taxoon ñu laxa li nga xam ne mooy woon draft biñ bindoon noonu.
And we are preoccupied with manipulations that they did.
ba pare nag ñu dal di sukkandiku nag ci ay soppale ak ay defaraat dugal seen loxo daal ci mbir yi.
On the other hand, our politicians who had either overlooked some of the technical issues or whatever,
politiciens yi nga xam ne nag ñoom bàyyiwuñ woon xel ci yenn ci mbir yooyu nga xam ne moo ci nekkoon.
Two, they had probably underestimated what could have happened to the draft while it was hoarded.
wala boog sax dañ néewaloon natta gi nga xam ne moom lañ ñattoon lan moo war a xew ci draft boobu jamono juñ ko laaxee.
Or they were so overconfident that if we rush to referendum and then which leads us into election, the junta were going to be out.
Wala boog sax daf leen oron peng ne suñu yakamte bu baax rek pour doxal mbiri dem referendum bon junta bi nañ génn.
Such prejudice led some politicians to rigorously go around the Gambia asking us to quickly go in for referendum.
Dafa taxoon sax ba yenn politiciens yi ñu yakamti dugg ci suñu biir réew mi pour ñu gaaw doxal mbiri dem referendum.
Which did not give the populace the space and the time to look at the final draft and scrutinize and come up with relevant comments and so on.
Loolu dafa taxoon sax ba mënuñ woon a am jot pour nit ñi mun a dem seetantal li nga xam ne moom lañ bindaagum noonu ci wàlli luwaa bi ni moo doxee mun a xam liñ cee ànd ak liñ cee bañ.
While on the other hand, people thought the first draft that they saw and their comments were incorporated in will come up, a final draft will come which will have on board those concerns, and they did not foresee any manipulations of omissions and so on, that the draft we were going to vote for was the one desirable.
xëj na sax nit ñi fogoon nañ ne binda bu njëkk boobu ñu bindoon ñoom seen xalaat yi nga xam ne moom lañ ci dugaloon loolu dina feeñ bu fekkee ne ca mujjanteel ba binda nañ yëpp ba nga xam ne boobu mooy war a dox mu nekk luwaa.
My opinion is these issues together give us the junta the mandate to have a constitution that was so manipulative and can nurture and indeed nurtured dictatorship in the Gambia.
Loolu nag man si suma wàlli xalaat moo tax ne ma ne loolu moo dooleeloon junta bi mu di soldaar yooyu ñu mun a am doole ba nga xam ne dinañ taxawal njiit loo xam ne dafa doxal nguuri jaay doole ci kaw nit ñi.
However, there were post-referendum or post-election remedies that we could have explored, which we failed.
ba tey de gannaaw élection bi wala gannaaw référendum bi amoon na yeneen yoo xam ne mënoon nañ ko cee def waaye nag defuñ ko.
If we had legal activists who would have said no, but what has come out was not what was being prepared.
su fekkoon nañ amoon nañ ko xam ne kuy yëngu la ci li nga xam ne moo di doxalini luwaay mu daal di taxaw jonna ne déedéet lii nekkul ci li nga xam ne ñun moom lañ pareeloon.
And such observations were well publicized.
te li nga xam ne moom la ko nit ñi gisee woon siiwal nañ ko bu baax a baax ba pare doxal ko.
It can even go into challenges and demonstrations or whatever.
dina dem ba ci ay ŋàñña yoo xam ne dinañ ko ci mun a def pour def ay ñaxtu sax.
At least that early moment interventions could have undermined these people's manipulations that they have created, and probably an early remedy would have been available.
su fekkoon ne teel nañ cee dugal suñu gémmiñ bon di nga gis ne lii nga xam ne ñoom jël nañ seen loxo def li leen neex ci wàlli luwaa boobu ni kon nañ ko doon mun a fànqa ca ndoorte ga.
These are my deductions, and I will welcome or I want you to mobilize your opinion and probably in your concluding remarks some of the comments that will help us.
waaw lii nag man mooy suma xalaat xëy na mën nga koo boole ci kàddu yu mujj yi nga xam ne moom nga fee war a gaaral.
Thank you, Commissioner Kinte. I would say they're very valid observations. Maybe all he's trying to say, we left it too late.
jërëjëf Commissioner Kinte.
But I would agree with you.
danaa wax rek ne daal gis-gis bu wér la nag ci mbir moom te ànd naa ci yow jërëjëf.
Thank you. Imam Jallow, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Witness.
seede bi Imam Jallow moo laa laaj si.
My question will lie on making amendments to the Constitution.
man suma laajte mooy mbiri soppale yi nga xam ne ñu ngi koo def ci luwaa bi.
I was lucky to be born in the provinces when it was in the colonial era.
man nag yàlla wërsëgal na ma juddoo ci dex gi ci jamono nguuri tubaab yi.
And the constitutional matter was not even raised in the provinces.
jamono jooju nag mbiri constitution bi mu di luwaa bi réew mi di doxee duñ ko daan tudda sax ci gox gi.
We lived happily and the laws were executed according to law.
dañ dëkkoon dëkkin mu neex te luwaa yi niñ ko doon doxalee mu ngi doon jaar ci ni ko luwaa soxlaa.
Then we came into colonialism and then the first, second and third republic.
ñu ñëwee nag ci wéri doxalini réewi doxalini nguuri tubaab ak république bu njëkk bi ak ñaareel ba.
Any person who comes into power, the first thing you think about is how to amend the constitution to entrench yourself.
képp koo xam ne nag ñëw nga nekk njiit ci réew mi fii li nga njëkk a xalaat mooy ni nga wéccee lu waay réew mi di doxee pour mu mun laa dooleel yow.
Is there no way that Spanish could be put to the works to ensure that this move is blocked by making the constitution a fixed thing that there will be no change?
ndax amul yenn anam wala yenn jumtuwaay yoo xam ne dinañ ci mën a sukkandiku bu dëgër ba nga xam ne constitution bi mu luwaa bi réew mi di doxee dinañ ko def ci ay anam yoo xam ne kenn du ko mën a soppali.
Other riders could be put in to help to assist clauses within the constitution.
xëj na mun naa am ay yenn sew sewaan rek yoo xam ne dinañ ko jël pour mu mun a dooleel ay bunta yoo xam ne mu ngi ci biir luwaa bi.
What's your take on this?
loo nag loo gisee loolu.
Thank you, Imam. You know, constitutions are made by people, so we sure would have no idea what would happen to our country probably in the next 100 years. But it's all about making sure there are guarantees, making sure everything revolves around institutions, not individual. And a good way, or one thing that could have helped address the issue you mentioned, Imam, would have been having term limits in our constitution. Remember earlier on I said term limits recommended in the 1996 draft that disappeared. The last draft also recommended term limits. So at the end of the day, if we were to have term limits in our constitution, that would mean, irrespective of how powerful you are, irrespective of how good you think you might be, when you serve your term, you would have to go, never to come back. You know, so I would say maybe that's a very, very important safeguard, but it sure wouldn't be possible or safe to draft a document nobody can change. That would lead into chaos because, you know, times change, people change, society changes. So, yes.
Just a correction.
Yeah.
We have seen it lately that we're even in countries where there are term limits, the presidents will entrench themselves and ensure that they take a third term or even a fourth term. And there are good examples in the last 2 years in West Africa.
dafa am luñ seetlu sax ci yeneen fànn ci réew mi luwaa bi sax dina tëral ne président bi ñaari yoon rek la war a toog waaye bu toogee ba pare tere mu yokk ko.
I wouldn't, it's left to the people. Obasanjo tried that in Nigeria, it didn't work. People voted against it. The president might want one thing, whether we're talking about Gambia, Guinea, anywhere. But at the end of the day, it's for the people to decide. If you look at our constitution, it tells you sovereignty lies in the people of this country. It's us. So at the end of the day, whether you want to spend 30 years, 40 years, it is left to us to decide. So it is for us to decide. It was tried in some, of course, in a lot of West African countries, other countries around Africa, it succeeded. But Nigeria is a very good example. Obasanjo tried, but he failed. Yeah, so because Nigerians were really not ready for that. So I would say it's us. Yes.
Thank you. There are no further questions. Before witness takes the floor to make his concluding remarks, I thought in the discussions in the commissioners' conference room, Imam Jallo is a lot more radical than me. So surprised to hear him say on the colonial thing, we were happy. How can anybody be happy on the colonial rule? But Imam, you didn't need to come back and answer, clarify that point. We just leave it at that. Or do you want to respond to that? No. Were you happy during colonial rule? Mr. So, if you have any concluding remarks to make, please proceed to do so now.
I'll be brief. Just some points I noted. I watched the testimony, so when I saw the Imam's mic on, I was like, I listened to his because I was like, hey, Mom, I hope I won't just be hit hard But thank you. Yes, just some points I wanted to make. I'm going to improvise. I didn't prepare anything. We talked about the new Gambia. Moving away from dictatorship. Constitutional reform. Institutional reform. Law reform. Of course, nobody would agree things have improved somehow, but I am very much disturbed. The slow pace, particularly when it comes to legal reform. Law reform. We almost to the final. You know, this is the final year of the president leader's term, but we haven't fared very well when it comes to doing something about the draconian laws. Bii nag mooy at mujj ci diir bi nga xam ne nii mooy mandat président bi waaye ba léegi déggaguñ nag lu jëm ci wàlli loi yi nga xam ne nii mu ngi aju draconian law yi. Of course, new laws, Human Rights Commission Act passed, very much welcome. Trrc Act passed, very much welcome. Crc Act passed, very much welcome. Li njiiti bunte yooyu nga xam ne nii ay penc lañ mu tudd noonu yëpp ñëw nañ tey tamit dal dinañ yéen. But decrees are still very much part of our laws in this country. I don't think we have done enough to make sure we have them change, amended, repeal to make them conform to democratic principles. I have talked about the Indemnity Act, the NIA Act. I can give a full list. I can't, other than the new laws, I can't remember any law we've repealed or amended, or probably other than the ones I talked about, setting up the institutions. Any other new law? I might be wrong. I can't remember. The only change that comes to mind is amending the part of the Constitution that, imposed, that one on age limits. And cross-carpeting. And cross-carpeting. Even the way the cross-carpeting was handled was funny in the sense, what is now covered is persons crossing from one party to the other. They haven't addressed the issue of independent candidates changing to join political parties. So I don't know. Yes, so I would say we still have a very long way to go. Yeah, so we really need to take law reform more serious. One other point I wanted to make, I know we would say, even though there are challenges, we have won the battle for civil political rights. Of course, despite challenges, you very rarely hear about people getting tortured, people getting disappeared. But I really would plead with all of us, including the government, for us to start looking into social and economic justice. Social economic justice. Social economic justice. We told about 66% of Gambians are below the age of 35. What are we doing about youth unemployment?
buntu liggéeykaay ñeel ndaw ñi.
What are we doing about good quality education?
Lan la ñuy def ci wàllu njàng mu sell.
What about food security?
Ak dund bu kaaraange dund.
I mean, what about good healthcare?
Ak itamit wér gu yaram
The list can go on.
Lu na mën naa lim bi mën naa continuer di dem.
I honestly see it as a very big security threat.
Gis naa ni daal nekk na loo xam ne ni lu xajamal kaaraange la.
Every day in the papers, social media, people talk about how corrupt our society is.
But bu set ci buntu taseekaay xibaar yi ci internet bi ak kayiti xibaar yi ñuy wax naka la nit ñi jubadee.
In my mind, that very much speaks to the social economic justice challenges we're facing.
Ci suma bopp na loolu nekk na ay tex-tex yi nga xam ne ni ñu ngi koy jànkuwanteet.
And I think we really have to start taking that more serious.
Te yaakaar naa nag jot na pour nag ñu fulaal nag bunte yu mel noonu.
Yeah, like I said.
Comme ni ma ko waxee woon.
Security, clean water, clean environment. You know, we're hearing a lot of environmental issues.
Dëkkuwaay bu sell
in the combos.
Ba bu set ñu ngi dégg nag dëkkuwaay fii xayam yàllankoor yi ci am rawatina ci kombo.
I think we need to sit up, we need to take them serious because they're very, very big security challenges.
Yaakaar naa foog suñu fulaal ko nag nekk nañ loo xam ne ni nag lu xajamal kaaraange la.
I would also use this opportunity to plead with all of us to start listening to each other.
Danaa sukkandiku nag si bunte bi di sàkku si ñun ñëpp ñuy dégluwante.
We don't.
Duñ koy def de.
Saaga ndey yu bari. Bandendiro siata.
Saagante ndey.
You know, let's have respect for each other. Let's listen to each other. This is our country.
Ñu cëralante dégluwante.
It wouldn't matter what ethnic group you belong to.
Li suñu réew la seetuñ ci ban xeet nga bokk.
It also wouldn't matter what religion you belong to. Gambia is for all of us.
Ci ban diine nga nekk Gambia pour ñun ñëpp la.
So please let's try to listen to each other.
ñu ngi sàkku ñun ñëpp ñu dal di dégluwante.
You know, it's something that is of concern.
Nekk na loo xam ne ne mbir mu soxal nit ñi la.
Finally, I really wanted to thank the TRRC. I think you have been doing a stellar job. I am a big fan. I was part of the advocacy before it was set up, and of course I have been working with victims for a while. Just to say, I'm so very thankful. You have done extremely well. This is my time to plead again. I am pleading with all of us Gambians, particularly the leadership of this country, or whoever is going to be responsible or would be involved in the implementation of your recommendations. I would plead that we take the recommendation serious. I have given many interviews, some to the international press, and I always would say, whichever way we go as a country would depend on how serious we take the TRRC. We can talk about a new Gambia, a progressive Gambia, if the recommendations of this important body are not taken serious. People are hurting, families are hurting. So really important that we do our best to make sure the recommendations are fully implemented. I have no information to show they wouldn't be, but I'm just pleading all of us to really make sure we do that. Some of us have been doing documentation even before the TRRC was set up. And believe me, it's no threat. We're ready to go to court if we're not happy with what comes out of this process and maybe the way the recommendations are handled. In fact, I've been on a lot of pressure to go to court, but insisted we have to wait to the end of the TRRC before we can take up some of these cases. So I have no powers to threaten, but just to say we're all watching and we're really ready to do the right thing. As Commissioner Kinte mentioned, the activism, challenges if possible, we all braced up for that.
waaye nag aw ma doole nag pour tikku waaye nag ñu ngi ñëpp a ngi bàyyi xel.
We're watching all of you commissioners, but I am really grateful I was given this opportunity. So I thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sow, again, for coming to testify for the Commission.
Mr. Sow, commission bi.
Especially on an important topic regarding the Constitution of the Gambia. The testimonies help us understand what went wrong and if constitutions are not good, what the consequences could be for the country and society. Again, we thank you very much for your testimony. We will end our proceedings here for today. And we will resume Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. In the meantime, we wish our Christian brothers and sisters happy Easter. Thank you all very much for coming. Meeting is adjourned.